Hello again everyone, Melth here. In the spirit of the recently announced Age of Mythology remaster called Age of Mythology Retold, I thought I would remaster some of my own early videos. I've been playing this game for 20 years, since I was 10 when it first came out, and to this day it is one of my favorite RTSs. So when Tale of the Dragon came out 6 years ago, I decided to make my first ever series of videos about this game. In this series, I tackled the game on Titan difficulty, often with extra challenges such as speedruns or zero casualty runs of various missions depending on what seems fun for that particular mission. I try to make it both accessible to beginners by talking about the basics, and also hopefully eye-opening to some more experienced players by talking about some of the game's hidden mechanics in detail. I will also be praising or critiquing or just commenting on the game's design, cinematics, story and characters, and also the history and mythology that underlies the game. Let's start with the tutorial. Doing this 6 years ago started as my own tutorial for video making, and my microphone back in those early videos wasn't much good, which is one reason I'm redoing some of them now. I think this opening cinematic does quite a good job of both introducing the basic high concept of the game, and also giving you various exciting set pieces to look at. That glowing unit is Circe, or the Greeks would have pronounced it more like Kirke from the Odyssey. We'll meet her later on. This part of the cinematic is a little bit strange to me, because it almost sounds like a commercial, but for a game that you're already playing. Whereas the previous parts seem more like a high-concept summary of the basic ideas of the game for people who might not be familiar with RTSs or the concept of this game in particular. Anubites and Meteor are the game's iconic myth unit and god power respectively, and both will show up a whole lot. So, coming up, we have our first tutorial mission, where we learn the basic controls. And although, as Athena says, the task is a simple one, they put in more effort than they had to beautify things, and I appreciate that. Note that guy you can see way off on the right side there. You're not supposed to see that. The extended edition kind of broke a lot of the cinematics by widening the view of what's actually displayed to include all kinds of things that were properly cropped out in the original version of the game. Alright, so we're learning the basic controls here, which are pretty much the same as most other RTSs that I've played. You know, left click to select, right click to give an order. The right clicking is pretty smart. If you click a location, it'll go to it. If you click an enemy, it'll attack it, etc. Again, they give us lots of little pretty details to look at along the way here, like these fallen pillars and the major god statue. I always appreciate when developers put in more work than they really need to. As Athena, the tutorial lady, mentioned before by the way, we click the mission objectives to find out obviously what our objective is, but also how they recommend we complete it. Sometimes the spotlight for mission doesn't actually reflect the finished version of the mission and will be kind of out of place, or irrelevant. Note that people in a group move at the speed of the slowest guy in the group, but they do get into a fairly smart formation. So sometimes, depending on the situation, it'll be optimal to split your troops up so they move at their full speed, or to keep them together so they stay in a good formation. Just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. They also, interestingly, move at full speed when running into formation. Soon you'll see a pretty waterfall along the path here. I think most of this game's visuals have held up really well, so I don't think they really needed a remaster, but I welcome one. I will say I'm not generally a fan of remasters. I'd rather have new games instead. But here I think the extended edition had kind of broken a lot of content, and it would be nice to have a remaster that fixes everything and gets it back to the original quality and better. Note this dark but not black area here. That's Fog of War, where we don't know if there are enemies present, but we do at least know what the terrain is. In practice, of course, campaign maps don't change, so you know what the terrain really is if you've played it once or twice. But in a random map, or a multiplayer game or something like that, you do need to scout to find out where the resources are and what the terrain is like, as well as where the enemies are. So let's talk about stats and combat. Looking at the bottom of the screen here, you can see Arcantos has 300 hit points. 9 hack type attack, that's what the sword means, as opposed to pierce attack from this archer over here, for example. And he reduces incoming hack and pierce damage by 50% apiece. Cyclops has 15 hack damage and reduces incoming hack attacks by 40%. So you might think, therefore, that Arcantos would deal about 9 times 0.6 equals about 5 damage per attack, but that's not the case at all. Because the game's combat relies very heavily upon some hidden multipliers. You can see here I deal about 40 damage per hit, and the variation is not because of luck, it's just because of fractions getting multiplied. Specifically, Arcantos deals X7 damage to myth units. Now the game does tell you that he deals bonus damage to myth units, but they don't tell you whether it's plus an amount, or X an amount, or what the amount would be. The answer is it's X7. But every hero in the game has their own multiplier, and so does every other unit that does bonus damage to anything, some of which is not even listed. That's crucially important, and it makes the numbers you can actually see quite misleading, so I don't think that was a really good design choice in this strategy game. On to the next mission though. So this next tutorial mission covers the economy, and they cover that before the military with good reason. Compared to most other RTSs, the economy is a very big portion of this game, and military stuff really is secondary. So here we'll learn about our three main resources, food, wood, and gold. So the core of the game is that everything you want to build costs some combination of those resources. So to get them, you need to build villagers at a cost of 50 food apiece from the town center, send them out into the world to harvest them, and then they return the resources, at which point you can then use it to build things. You can see the villager training progress bar down there. If I click on that, it cancels the villager and refunds the resources, and the button I just clicked tells it to constantly train villagers as long as I can afford it. Right-clicking sets a rally point where the villager will go to wherever I direct it to and then start harvesting that resource. You can see that the goat I'm about to harvest has an available amount of food that then fattens over time, but then once it's dead, all that food starts going from the goat into the villager's inventory, which you can then see here. Note that this is still not food that's available to me yet. I still have 0 food. I won't get it until the villager drops it off back at the town center, which he'll automatically do once he gets to 15 food. That inventory is lost if the villager dies or is told to harvest something else, by the way. So you'll soon see once he gets to 15, he'll walk to the town center and then it goes into my stockpile and then I can use it to build things. I get some more villagers. Note, by the way, that their appearance is either male or female is totally cosmetic. I'll send most to food, but 1 to gold, and 1 over here to start harvesting wood. I won't bother with the farm. In fact, I will never farm if I can avoid it. Farms are horribly slow compared to all other food gathering methods. So as my villager fells the tree, note that it doesn't get any lumber yet. But now when it hits the fallen tree, it gets about 2 lumber per strike, with some fractions. But over here, if I mine from this gold mine, you'll see that I only get about 1 gold per strike. They don't tell you anywhere, but there are different gather rates for all these resources. Wood is the fastest, food is the slowest, especially farming. This is the most fundamental aspect of the game, so I really don't think they should have made the mechanics so misleading. Let me actually cancel the villager as training there, so I can get to my goal of 100 food stockpiled faster. I think it would have been better and simpler design to keep the gather rates the same as one another, and then just adjust the visible unit prices to fit that. It's also good to know, by the way, that all gold mines gather at the same rate, so do all different species of trees, all different huntable animals, all different herdable animals, and all types of fish. Storehouses act like drop sites for resources like town centers do. Your villagers will conveniently automatically go to whatever drop site is closest to them, and once they reach it, then you can use those resources. So keep the path as short and efficient as you can. You can also manually order your villagers to drop off resources early. That's usually less efficient, but it can help you hit a certain resource threshold immediately, like it did here. Now, besides gathering resources, villagers can also spend those resources to construct buildings like temples for you. Multiple villagers can work together, but secretly, every villager after the first one is only 30% as helpful as the first one was. Again, they don't tell you about the diminishing return, but it does exist for construction, not for gathering most resources. Now, Greeks, and only Greeks, gather favor, a 4th resource, by having villagers spend time worshipping at their temple. But secretly, every villager after the first one is much less efficient than the first one, and each subsequent one gets worse and worse. Since how many villagers to devote to gathering favor rather than other resources is a key strategy decision, I do think that information should have been available. On to the last tutorial. So here we learn about the second half of the economy, about military units, and meet our first villain, Arcantos' old enemy, Kamos the Pirate. I don't think this cinematic is quite as good as the one from the first tutorial, but I still appreciate that once again they put in more effort than they really had to. So it's time to learn more about how to manage the economy and then use it to actually do things. We have quite a few villagers, but the most are standing around doing nothing. You never want to have a villager standing around doing nothing. Villagers who are not working can be selected with this button, which is currently bugging in this strange looking way. The objectives button is looking weird too. Strange. Anyway, if you have an idle villager and don't know why, that button is a great way to find out. I'll just divide them up between gathering food, wood, and gold. I have plenty, so it doesn't really matter in this mission. But let me just have this one stop for a moment, so you can see that the banner now has only 1 person on it, meaning 1 idle villager as opposed to having 2 or more. Next up is a very important and quite good mechanic, advancing to the next age, which you can see costs a lot of resources. There are 4 ages: Archaic, Classical, Heroic, Mythic. Each one costs massively more resources than the previous one and takes a very long time at your town center, which means that one can't be building any more villagers. Once you advance to the next age, though, you unlock much better units and buildings. So it's both a tempo control for the game and also a major risk versus reward mechanic. Should you build more villagers and soldiers now to be safe? Or are you strong enough that you can make yourself weaker in the short term to become much stronger in the long term? One thing I love about it is that you get to choose one of 2 gods to advance with in particular. Each god offers a unique one-time power, 1 or more unique myth unit monsters you can build, and 1 or more special upgrades you can get to improve your other troops or buildings or things like that. This is often a major strategy choice, and it's an irrevocable one. You can't go back and get the other god ever, and you can't ever be DH'd ever. I think this might be the best and most interesting tech-up mechanic that I've seen in an RTS. Next up, I'll build some military academies, which are where the Greeks train their most basic soldiers. As I mentioned previously, it is most efficient to have your villagers work on 2 separate buildings, rather than all focus on one at the same time. And the difference is really quite substantial. So always do that unless one building needs to be done absolutely ASAP for some reason. So as I said, military academies train our basic Greek infantry units, hoplites. Just as an FYI, I might often call all military producing structures barracks in the future for shorthand. Anyway, only one of the 2 hoplites will actually finish, because I'm about to run into my population cap. I'm at 23 out of 25 currently. Each hoplite costs 2 upon completion. So one of them will not complete. He'll just get stuck at 99%. And this next one I ordered will start training, but he also won't finish. To let them finish, I need to build houses, which just unlocked and grant 10 population apiece. You can only ever build 10 houses maximum, by the way. And the town center also grants 15 more population, so usually you have a limit of about 115 population. That's a pretty strict limit, and it creates another great trade-off between having more villagers and having more soldiers. So another good risk versus reward mechanic, which is foundational to the game. The one other big way to increase your population limit is to build other town centers, but you can't just do that anywhere. You can only build a town center on a pre-placed settlement site on the map. Most buildings you can plonk down wherever you want. I mean, not on top of terrain or trees or other buildings, but town centers can only be built on top of settlements, nowhere else. I'll have all these villagers move over to work on the next objective, building a bunch of towers. I think I'm going to build myself 2 towers to demonstrate some points about how they work, even though only 1 is required. So these are called sentry towers, and they display as if they have an attack, but don't be fooled, they don't actually have an attack. That's quite misleading. Also note, once villagers finish building one thing, they automatically help out with any other construction nearby. Anyway, sentry towers can't fight, but you can garrison villagers into them. The little flag means someone is garrisoned inside that building. Garrisoned inside, they're safe. You can also, of course, upgrade your towers to watchtowers. Watchtowers can actually fight. Now, the price of a tower is about 3 times that of a basic archer. It does about 2 times as much damage, but it's many times sturdier. So it can be a pretty cost-effective way to defend a fixed area. But of course, once that area stops mattering, the tower is no longer useful, and that is therefore wasted resources. Oh, and as you saw, by the way, the tower upgrade is universal, upgrades all towers, past, present, and future. Now next, I'm building some centaur myth units. Myth units are one of those things that you spend your favor on. Each god that you can advance with grants different myth units. Their main strategic role, really, is that although they may cost a lot of resources, they are incredibly powerful in terms of combat power per population cost compared to human soldiers. But enemy heroes can counter them really effectively, creating another risk versus reward mechanic. It's great. Now they tell us that during the attack we should garrison our villagers back into the town center by clicking this town bell icon. Note that as the villagers garrison inside, you can see the town center's attack power going up, by the way. Note that the attack damage is kind of misleading, by the way. That is the damage per arrow it shoots, and it actually shoots 2 of those at once. One nice trick about garrisoning, by the way. You can garrison somebody in from one side of the building, then set the rally flag to the other side and they'll pop out there when you ungarrison them, effectively teleporting them if you do it really fast. Now, in a real game, you would pretty much never ever use the town bell, because that just kills your economy. Instead of having all villagers stop working, just have whoever is in danger during an attack stop working. So now it's time to go on offense and destroy the enemy pirate camp. I'll talk about a few more details of combat on the way, I think. Centaurs, by the way, are quite fast, but as I mentioned before, when they're put in a formation, they move at the speed of the slowest guy with them. Now note that when I run Arcantos past his enemy soldier, Arcantos does not stop to fight until he reaches his destination, so be careful to avoid that, or you'll give the enemy free hits against you. Again, I'll demonstrate. If I just run by him, I get chopped up without counterattacking. Not good. What you do instead is click the A button, then left click the destination. That way you'll fight enemies you find along the way. Let me talk about one other mechanic here. The Centaur has a yellow bar under his hit points when you click on him. So does Arcantos. That's a special attack charge up bar. You see it gets used up the instant you do your first attack with that unit. Sadly, that means you can't directly control when to do the special attacks. They're just done automatically when it's charged up. Now for some fun with a Meteor God power, which will devastate the target area, buildings and units alike. The first meteor always hits directly where you target, everything after that is random within that area. It can hurt your own guys, so stay clear. Meteor is so cool, one of my favorite god powers. It's just a ton of fun to smash enemy buildings and armies with meteors raining on them out of the sky, throwing their units around and everything. Alright, time to go in and mop up the last few buildings, and then I win. These things are tents, which are kind of like free houses you get in the campaign sometimes that don't count against your house cap. As a minor note, they worship Zeus in this scenario, but they have the Poseidon symbol. A mild oversight there, I think. Alright, that's a wrap for the tutorial.
Victory is ours! Well done, men! Break camp and load the ships. We sail for Atlantis with the tide.
Well, I hope Age of Mythology Retold is as much of an improvement as this was. Thank you for watching, everyone. And a special thank you to my Patreon supporters: Illusory Thunder, Master Knight DH, Advanced Warrior, Gregory, William Wakefield, Kenny Boggs, Danny Hall, and Jeffrey Morse. Have a great day, everyone!